Before August 1947, India was a one big country, and on the map of the world there was no Pakistan. But in 1947, August 14th, Pakistan became another country. But during that partition, so many people were killed. 1.5 million people estimated they were killed, raped, bothered, disturbed, mutilated. 15 million immigrants. It is called the mass migration. Forcefully happened between India and so-called Pakistan now. During that time, so many people were uprooted. They were all scared. They did not know what to do, where to go, and they were also surprised. All of a sudden, what happened? People who were neighbors, people who were friends, and all of a sudden, people killing people and looting. What happened that time? I'm here to talk with 3 young people who did not witness this thing. Thank God they did not witness this, but their parents or maybe grandparents have witnessed that. So we are going to talk to them today. What is their take on it? What do they think about it as young people? Hello everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Introduce yourself please.
Well, my name is Musawir Khan, and I just moved to New York like 6 months ago. I came from Pakistan.
My name is Akash Wasil. I've lived on Long Island my whole life. My parents were born in India though.
My name is Muhammad Talha Sheikh. I live in Long Island. I was born here.
So we have interesting people here. And by the way, Akash, I believe you have written a book with your grandfather.
Yes.
Which is called Beyond Milestone.
Beyond Milestones. And one of the most interesting things is that my grandfather witnessed the partition, and we discussed that in the book, and that's kind of how I learned a lot about it.
Tell me a little bit more about it. What did he tell you what happened that time?
So he had a lot of friends growing up that were Pakistani and a lot that were Hindu and Muslim, and so they interacted, they were in the same neighborhood as he was growing up. But then when the partition happened, that all erupted. And one of the most memorable stories he told me about was his cousin's best friend was a Muslim, and when partition happened, his cousin, who was his cousin's friend, the Muslim, came to their house and he wanted refuge because there were riots going on in the streets, and my grandfather's cousin turned him away, and he was actually, the friend was killed that day. And it was just shocking for me to hear about that, and same for my grandfather at the time, why all of a sudden, because of these religious and political differences, these lifelong friendships just shattered.
So you heard from this from your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, he's a friend of mine. His name is Surendra Mitra. And I feel that you are lucky that he wrote this book with you, or you wrote the book with him. Either
very
way.
lucky, yeah.
And he described some things also in the 1947, what happened, some of the incidents in this book.
Yeah, of course. Overall, I mean, he summarizes it, historically, the hundreds of thousands of people that were killed, the 10 million plus that were displaced. And then he highlights, his personal reaction to it as, a child growing up in that environment, how he had to, react with all this suffering and cope.
So you came to know all about this from your grandfather.
Mostly, yeah. I was actually really surprised, after hearing about it, it's such a big event, that it's not more talked about, say, in high school classes or in history. It's sort of just overlooked as and then India got its independence. But there's so much surrounding it that I uncovered thanks to my grandfather.
We will come back to that. How do you know about it? And what do you know about it?
I've been reading about this since I was in the first grade and been studying about it. So for high school, we were only reading in books what happened that day. We only discussed what actually happened for the independence. We only studied about what Pakistan had to go through and what the Pakistani people had to go through. We never studied from the Indian side, what their thoughts were and what they think about what happened. And I wish we reading something is different from experiencing something. We weren't even born at that time. We only read about it, we only see it. So I wish I knew what actually happened and what was basic idea. Why did they separate it? What was the reason? If it was a really good movement, if you take out all the killings and all the deaths, why did that have to happen? So
we will come back to that also. Yeah. We will discuss in the program why it happened, How about you?
Well, I'm a history buff. I read everything about history and all that. So I read a lot of books. That's how I mostly learned about the partition. And my family's Pakistani. My grandfather is one of the people who took part in the Pakistan movement. So I've learned through my uncles and through history, reading up more and more about it.
Is there a blame game in this when you hear, do they say, oh, Indians
course,
did this? There's a blame game. Do you also hear that from your grandfather that Pakistanis did?
Not so much from my grandfather, but he talks about how a lot of people, around him at the time were very much, blaming the other side.
How about you?
You know what? I've learned the Pakistani perspective, and it's that. But now, when I read the history books and everything, it's both sides were to blame. What happened there wasn't fair to either side, and you can't blame one side or the other. Both sides are equally responsible for what happened. The killing was a consequence of both sides doing really bad things that shouldn't have.
Let me ask you, would you kill your friend if you
Never.
disagree with him?
Never ever.
You sure?
Yeah, 100% sure.
How about you?
I don't think I would either. But then again, if you would ask these people at that time period, like,
Yeah.
the day before partition happened, I'm sure they would say the same thing. So, but yeah, I don't think I would.
Would you kill a friend?
No, never.
You won't.
Never ever.
Are you guys sure?
Positive.
Yeah.
Look at me and then tell me, are you sure?
Yeah.
I just met you and I wouldn't kill you.
I like to share one thing. I also did not witness this. But my father, who was born in Pakistan and then moved to India, and he told me these stories. I also want to share with you the part 1 of this show we did. We had people who were born in India, moved to Pakistan, people who were born in Pakistan and they moved there. And their perspective is the same as you young generation wants to know why it happened. And they also feel it should not have happened. What do you feel?
For me, I think why it happened because lack of education maybe. People didn't know what was right and what was wrong at that time. Misunderstanding from both sides, not from one side. Misunderstanding from both sides. Muslims used to think they are bad against them, and the Hindus used to think they are bad. So a lot of misunderstandings, lack of education, lack of information. I think that's the reason that it happened, and a lot of political reasons too. The politicians framing themselves, and they didn't think about the people. They just fed their minds with useless information and stuff, and trying to create the hatred in their hearts. And I think that's the reason.
So you think it was a power game by political leaders?
And lack of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
What do you think, Akash?
I agree to some extent, in the sense that a lot of ordinary people probably didn't understand the whole situation. In fact, I don't think really anyone at the time really fully understood everything that was going on. And for people who weren't really that knowledgeable or educated about the situation, all that has to happen is they lose a loved one, right? Or someone in their family or their friend circle gets harmed or is in danger. And then they sort of get this animosity towards the other side. And the other side has, a very similar perspective, someone in an Indian family loses a loved one to a Pakistani riot, and then vice versa. And so there's all this tension being created because the only thing that people do know is this other side, killed someone close to me or even, attacked me. And then that just breeds more revenge, more animosity type of feelings.
What do you think?
Well, I agree and I disagree. I think the top political leaders at the time were definitely very sincere to the whole cause. What they wanted to do was very sincere, but at the lower level that wasn't translated, and you know what, unfortunately people died as a result. Should not have happened. Should have been more orderly, but we can sit here now 68 years later and say that, but who knows at the time what was the right thing to do. Even the British, they messed up a lot.
So you want to blame British people for this?
Well, the independence, if you read the history books, it should have happened a year later. It should not have happened in August 14th or 15th, 1947. In fact, at the time of the partition, you didn't even know the boundaries of India or Pakistan. Some people thought they would be in India, but the next day they woke up, they were in Pakistan. So, and vice versa. So a lot of mismanagement on both ends, and actually on three ends, the British, the Pakistanis, and the Indians, everyone messed up.
So according to you guys, we all are to be blamed for.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone is to be blamed
Yeah.
for.
There's no like right side here.
No.
It's just a lot of miscommunication.
Do you wish it should never have happened?
I do.
Well, I think that independence obviously was a very happy and very important step. Like obviously, you know, there was a lot of good that came from this, you know, and 2 countries emerged and 3 if we include Bangladesh now. But the killings obviously were entirely unjustified.
I agree. The killings were entirely unjustified, but I do support the idea of the partition on peaceful grounds, of course.
Just an idea I want to throw. What do you think would have happened if Pakistan was not there? It was one country, just like the way before 1947, and we were all living together.
Well, it would have been fantastic. Like, I mean, if it was like at this time, Pakistan and India, there's so much, you know, talented people from both countries. And if it was the same country, we would have been competing with a country like America or maybe something else. So I wish it didn't happen like this, and we would have been together, like living in harmony and peace. That would be something, you know, amazing. We would have the same movies, same cricket team. I would have loved to see like our movies being so like accepted globally, and like Virat Kohli and Shahid Afridi would be playing
You
the
are
same
a
team.
movie buff, that's why you're
No, not that, not
And
that.
cricket.
Lots of other things, lots and lots of other things. Like there should have been a way like to live in one place. Like here in America, have you ever seen like Pakistan-Indian fight? No, I've never. It's only been 6 months, and Indians so care about the Pakistanis and vice versa. But why that time? Why didn't care at that time? It should have happened at that time. Like
I agree with you. India and Pakistan do have cricket, movies, and
Yeah.
a lot more in common. And I agree with you, all of you, whether it should not have happened or it should not have happened. We'll be right back after the break.